Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira, and we're here with Gregor Gregersen to continue on part 2 of our conversation about Singapore, the reserve, and of course, precious metals. You know, Gregor, you started out this business with silver bars under your bed. Today you have this massive building, could be the world's largest silver vault by capacity. Could be.
Probably is.
Okay. How did you get to this point? I mean, what were you seeing all along the way? I mean, silver had a bad run for a while, but you maintained your course. Both precious metals had a pretty long sideways run for a while, but you kept your course, and today you have this massive vault. What enabled you to keep the course?
The course was easy because, you know, the story, I was in the trading room of Commerzbank and saw the after effects of Lehman Brothers going bankrupt in 2008 to realize the financial system really isn't very stable. And physical gold and silver is the answer. So that sort of set me up on this path and really removed any doubt that we're going to have systemic crises coming. And gold and silver is something that you would want to own. And I was just amazed that there wasn't really many entities out there which provided systemic wealth protection. There are people where you can store gold, but when you look at the way it was stored, it was not going to be there for you probably when the crisis happens. Yeah. And so it just seemed the right thing to do to build it. And as you know, we never really trying to prioritize profit. We're trying to prioritize building the best mousetrap possible on how to make it the safest system possible. And then I think our success comes down from just meeting clients who think the same way. And a lot of our clients, I mean, they will take a plane, fly to Singapore, other side of the world, and spend 3 days here and, you know, do the due diligence, make sure we are not some AI rendered sort of, facility, and ask a lot of tough questions and have a talk and see why we're doing it. And then once these people are convinced, they're storing their gold and their silver with us, and they go and they talk with other similar-minded people, and then these people are also buying. And I think that's not only the key of our success, it's also what allowed us to pursue a very different path from commercial vaulting. Because commercial vaulting is very much controlled and dependent by the big banks. And the big banks don't want their clients to go to the vault, because what's in it for the bank? And most of the profits remain with the big banks or the dealers. Very little is actually coming to the vault. And so these vaults don't have much money to invest. The processes, you know, sometimes they still use paper and pen. Oftentimes they're not the place you want to bring a client anyway, because it's not very attractive, you know, place to be. It just doesn't look very glamorous or safe sometimes. So having the clients and focusing on these clients allowed us to do things differently and build it in conjunction with them. I would have a client who would say, hey, I want to collateralize my gold. I don't want to sell it. How can I do it? That's how a peer-to-peer system came about. Very early on, we said, well, how do we make sure this gold bar is really real? We know where we bought it from, but what if it isn't? And then we had a lot of discussion with our clients, right? And then that's how we came up with the 5 different ways of non-destructive ways of testing. And then we decided we're going to guarantee it. And so it was really over a decade of interactions with clients on how we can do things better and better and better, which eventually led us to building something on the scale and building it on our terms. We never took money from venture capitalists. The people who helped fund this were largely our clients, actually. As you know, many of our employees have shares. And we are just doing it because the way we want to do it is because we want to protect people against systemic crisis coming. And we don't have to compete about the banking business trying to shave up one last basis point versus the other dealer trying to, work on it. It will be a very sad way of doing business. I think we're in it to do something more meaningful.
Right. You mentioned the clients asking or having tough questions. What do you think are probably the one or two toughest questions that they had asked you, or what do you think are some of the questions an investor should be asking if they're looking at storing overseas or offshore?
I think the first question to ask is, how do I know the gold is there? It's a simple question, but oftentimes the answer, oh, just trust us. And that's usually not a good answer, because you can never ask somebody to trust you. You can only show people why they ought to be trusting you, and then it's your choice to trust them or not. Right? So anybody who just asks you to trust them, you should probably distrust. They should have a clear sort of explanation how you know if the physical gold is actually there. The next question is, how do you know that gold hasn't been encumbered to other parties? In other words, how do I know that gold hasn't been leased to somebody else?
Yeah.
Or how do I know if this one gold bar hasn't been sold to 10 other people? And there are 10 creditors for this gold bar. How do I know that? And I think that's a key question. Another good question to ask, how do you know it's real? Mm-hmm. And I think lastly, what happens in case of nationalization? And I think the reality is, vast majority of entities you deal with, they won't be able to answer any of these questions. And we spent a decade, more like 15 years actually, finding the best way to mitigate and address these questions. And that's what's reflected in our 4 pillars. And we try to make people aware of these things because they matter.
Okay, and those 4 pillars would be ownership, Singapore jurisdiction, testing, that also comes with a genuinity guarantee, and of course insurance, because insurance, I think, a lot of people, they get caught up on how secure is the vault, what are your security systems and whatnot, and the insurance sometimes is an afterthought, but that should really be one of the most forefront things that you consider or look for.
If you want to understand how safe a place is, the best way is to ask the insurance company, because if anything goes wrong, the insurance company has to pay for it, right? And the insurance company, in our case, it's Lloyd's of London, so it's an insurance marketplace, so it's not one company. There are reinsurers, which, that's how you get the big policies, but they're sending the real security experts to evaluate your risk. And so there's the people which then evaluate what kind of risk level you are, and whether you qualify for a certain type of coverage, such as mysterious disappearance. Mysterious disappearance is pretty much the highest level of insurance you can get, because it means that we can have a loss that we cannot explain, where there's no police report, and it might be due to a mistake. Maybe we had 100 bars of silver coming, and we didn't count it correctly, so only 99. They got stored, and then later we found out they're only 99 instead of 100. Will the insurance pay? Well, in most cases it wouldn't. If you have mysterious disappearance, and that would actually be a claimable sort of act. Right. For a species inspector to recommend for that kind of coverage, you usually need to really build the trust with the insurance company. So that's the kind of thing which is a good way of checking whether the facility, is safe. But then, of course, when you come here, you've got all the gadgets people expect, right? Yes. So we got the lasers, we got the motion sensors, we got the vibration sensors, we got the contact centers, we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of CCTV cameras. We got all of these things, but it comes down to an expert from the insurance company to then evaluate how these things work in conjunction with the response times, the alarm systems, the redundancies, and all the other things can come together to build a vault which in its entirety is actually a safe place. And then you have the physical storage, which is one side. You have the jurisdictional side, which we talked about. Then you have the question of how you to protect the client from yourself.
Yeah.
How does the client know that I cannot take the client's bullion? How does the client know I cannot encumber it? Right? So that's another set of things. And we addressed all of these things by virtue of having dealt with clients which were very eager to have good answers to these questions, and ourselves being very eager to have good answers to these questions and build the best mousetrap we can. And that's really how we ended up being successful, one client at a time.
So Gregor, with all these things that we've been talking about, I'd like to ask you on the reserve. Any updates that you could share?
Yeah, so we completed phase 2 now, TUP2, so the facility is now pretty much completed. Most of the workers are gone and it's mostly operational. We're now looking for tenants. Our safe deposit boxes are now functional. We've got 12,500 new safe deposit boxes. So that's going to take a while to fill up. Watch workshop is open now, access. So we can authenticate watches, we can inspect them, eventually collateralize them, and we'll have a bid and ask system whereby clients will be able to essentially sell watches to each other. So it's not something Silver Bullion does, but it is something which is going to be in the reserve. Facilities had more and more events now. Last week we had the Singapore Bullion Market Association, which did its event. We had the launch of the Silver Bar of Metalor.
Yes.
Here we are getting industry chambers from various countries to have events here now. So it is a location which is going to be more and more on the radar of various entities. The Economist has been featuring us. Bloomberg has been featuring us. We're going to have a few documentaries. The German Galileo, which is going to be documenting this. The World Gold Council, is likes what they see. We'll probably be working together in some ways. We are increasingly sending that message out that gold is something people should be considering, and physical gold as such. So the plan we had to build an iconic vault is really coming together. If you look at the actual building and the renderings, sometimes you cannot tell which one is which.
It's that close, yes.
As when people come, the feedback is almost always that the building is so much bigger than they thought it was. We have 180,000 square foot. That's about 16,500 square meters. And we are essentially now fully operational in it and looking for the additional places. We're very careful on picking the right tenants. We don't have a shortage of potential tenants. It's just that we are looking at finding the right synergies and the right kind of tenant. And that's not always so easy.
Gregor, one thing though, the safe house, it has safe deposit boxes in there, but the reserve also has safe deposit boxes in there. And these are two different businesses, I could say. What are the differences between the two?
Yes, the difference is that the safe house, safe deposit boxes are something that we started about 9 years ago. And there is the option of getting the large 205 kilo boxes. And these boxes are really developed to store precious metal in particular. So you can get very good insurance on it and storage for the long term. Plus, we can provision the box remotely for you. So if you can tell us, I want to buy so and so much physical gold or silver, and I want it to be put into the box, we are then going to put it inside. We lock it, we put the seal, and we essentially send you the key. And we cannot have access on it anymore unless you or a representative of yours comes and opens it. And that's important because a safe deposit box is defined as us not having access on it. Otherwise, it's not a safe deposit box from a legal point of view. And there are some important tax implications of that. That's a safe deposit box for the safe house. For the reserve, it is a more traditional safe deposit box. So they're essentially mounted into the walls. We have a lot more of them. The size are a bit smaller, basically the usual safe deposit boxes. And there are, I think, 3 differences from the way safe deposit boxes normally operate. The first one is we have a very strong floor loading, which means that our safe deposit boxes are also reinforced, and we can put about 4 times more weight in them than normal safe deposit boxes. So that's one part. We have a system whereby you have 2 keys, and one goes to the client, one is held by us, like normal safe deposit boxes. But then once you access the box inside, you have an additional seal with a unique number. Okay. And that provides an additional proof of integrity for the box, so that you can know that somebody else hasn't accessed it. And the last difference is, which some safe deposit boxes have, some don't, but we can provide insurance up to $500,000 on the content without us having to know what is inside. So that combination of things is sort of defining the safe deposit boxes. Plus, you have very good access on these boxes. We're open 363 days a year. I think right now it's 12 hours per day. And if really need be, we can have an emergency access at night if that needs to be done. So, and these are operated from the reserve itself, as opposed to the safe house, because the safe house is closing down at certain hours, whereas the reserve, being facility itself, runs 24/7 as a facility.
I think one of the good points about it is we are fairly close to the airport, so you could easily take a hop, skip, and a jump from the airport to your safe deposit box and do your business.
Yes, and I mean, nowadays, right, some people like to put the ledger, the crypto ledger, basically inside, or let's say a paper wallet, if you're coming from the crypto world. Or some people, they might want to buy a kilo bar of gold, put it in there, and have their kids and or wife or family be authorized representatives. So, you know, if something happens to them, they can come and they can access the box. So it's, I think, a useful sort of backup system, and we put in a lot of checks and controls to make sure that only the correct people can have access, while providing the right flexibility for your loved ones to be able to have access, you know, if you want that to be the case.
Okay, and you touched on the tax implications. Safe deposit boxes have a different tax treatment from regular storage. Is that correct?
Well, it depends on your jurisdiction. In Singapore, we don't have capital gain taxes, so we don't have to pay, you know, taxes in any case. If you're looking at the United States, safe deposit box is not considered a financial account, and that's also because all you're doing is renting an area box. And so it's usually a non-reportable item. If you're opening an account and buying just physical, then it's a more questionable, depending on which tax attorney you talk to. They will tell you it is a financial account because you might be able to sell something online, or it's not a financial account because there's no financial instrument in it. So depending on your tax advisors, they might have different, you know, ways of looking at it, depending how conservative they are. But when it's a safe deposit box, pretty clear, black and white, that is a non-reportable item. With, you know, asterisks, not a tax advisor, so you better check yourself, because you never know how these things change. But, you know, I remember seeing it pretty clearly in the United States that it's not considered by the United States, almost as a countries, to be said. So it is a place where you can put your heirlooms, you can put your, again, a gold bar, you can put your crypto item, and you don't need to let anybody know what's inside. And that's what a safe deposit box is. And the important point is we don't have access to it.
Right.
And by using the seal, we have an additional way of proving that we haven't accessed it, because it's a one-time unique seal. Once you remove it, you cannot reattach it.
Right.
And I think that's a good feature to build in. And over 10 years at looking at how people operate such boxes, it made sense to do that.
Okay, and another feature with the reserve is we know gold and silver, platinum, stores of wealth, and so are watches. We are finding out that watches also can be stores of wealth, and with that, the excess is also here with a perpetual watch vault.
Yeah, so as we built this facility, we have 180,000 square foot. We have a lot more space than we originally needed for silver bullion. Watches are a synergistic sort of business. In a place like Singapore, for every person who likes physical gold bars, there are at least 30 people who like high-end watches. And so CXS has been around for about 4 years. Operated by somebody out of Switzerland who's been setting up watch workshops for large brands like Chopard for about 20 years. We have watchmakers from Rolex, I believe from AP, and from some other entities, and it's been now recognized by a number of brands, so official watch workshop as well. And so the purpose of it is to authenticate watches, to make sure they're real. We can give a very conservative valuation in case these are going to be used for collateralization, and we essentially can do maintenance on it as well. The watch workshop can also do repairs if something is damaged. It can be polished and so on, and essentially make the most out of that watch. And once you have that, the interesting thing about these high-end watches is there's something in between a work of art and a commodity like gold, because there is a market there where, depending on the watch type, let's say a Rolex Daytona watch, there is statistics on what the value of it is, and it's going up and down. So they sort of have a indicative sort of spot price equivalent thing going on. There's liquidity at that spot price, and so you can essentially use that. And we have this idea at Success that you can transfer in your watch. We remove most of the risk on whether it's a fake or a real, and whether it's stolen or not stolen, and all the other things. And then from there you can put an ask in and say, I'm willing to sell this watch at, say, $55,000. And maybe there's another client who's interested in buying it, and essentially create a platform for people to trade their watches. And we are not buying and selling the watch at Success. There's basically liquidity providers, certain dealers that we feel confident enough, to be on the system, which then kind of creates this liquidity, or collectors themselves and clients. So, and what's interesting is that oftentimes somebody might come here now because they're interested in the watch, but then they will start to understand what gold and silver is about, and that's where you get the synergies, where more and more people are coming to the reserve, for different reasons, essentially.
You mentioned the word liquidity. I think it was something that we might not have touched on when we were talking about vault storage. How important is it for the investor to understand liquidity when it comes to storing their precious metals?
Well, I think if you store somewhere, you want to make sure you can withdraw the gold if you need to, because that always makes sure you're not bound to one company somehow, right? It always gives you an option of withdrawing it and selling it to somebody else if you need to. So that's one thing to be you want to make sure of, which you are with us. The second thing is, if you want to sell your gold, then you would want to sell it to somebody, and that somebody is called a liquidity provider. Silver Bullion is a liquidity provider, so Silver Bullion will make an offer to buy it back. And we try to stay competitive on that offer. Now, how much liquidity we can provide? Well, you're selling us back 1 million, 2 million, it's no problem. You want to sell back $90 million in one go, then basically we become the middleman sometimes, where there's a refinery or somebody else which can absorb that kind of liquidity. And So ways these trades happen would depend a little bit, because on these really big deals you might be using a London fixed price at a certain point in time. But essentially we can provide liquidity on gold and silver, and as needed. Over time, as the amount of bullion stored grows and as Singapore matures as a gold hub, I would expect the margins to become smaller and smaller and the liquidity to become better and better. And so margins already gotten a lot better from when we started, like 15 years ago in Singapore. And that trend is probably going to continue.
Okay. Comparison Hong Kong, let's say Dubai as an example. How would you say Singapore compares as a, let's call it a gold hub, a precious metals hub between these two areas?
Dubai is a place where a lot of trading is happening, and it's a bit of a free-for-all. But we don't see a lot of people wanting to store gold long-term in Dubai. Hong Kong is a place where after China sort of took sort of a heavy hand and changed some of the laws in Hong Kong, quite a number of people started feeling less comfortable keeping their gold assets in Hong Kong. So I think some of that gold has moved out. But I also have to add that there's always a lot of inertia in these things. People say, I ought to be moving my gold out, maybe tomorrow, maybe next year, too much, whatever. Right? That's how people are at the end of the day. So there's still quite a bit of gold, I think, stored in Hong Kong. But if we have something happening over there, I guess that gold will gonna try to move out, move somewhere else. But I do believe that Hong Kong is going to have a strong future as a gold hub, because I can see it as becoming a gold hub for BRICS countries, especially in the future. Geopolitically, it just kind of seems to make sense. Singapore, on the other hand, is trying very hard to be a bridge between the East and West, as BRICS and the SWIFT wiring system, and so I think Singapore will be a very important place in terms of long-term storage of assets, both for Westerners and for people in the East, because it is that neutral jurisdiction. And more importantly, if we end up in a currency war scenario or in a conflict at a point when US and China are no longer trading among each other, then Singapore can become that hub which will allow for trade to restart. And the reason why is it is a trusted place by both China and the United States. And if you are a vault like what we are, which are only subject to Singapore law and very carefully made sure that we limit our jurisdiction to just Singapore, then we essentially don't dilute that Singapore jurisdiction. And if you're storing gold, everybody can agree that gold, I think, is inherently valuable, that it's an apolitical store of wealth. If you ask somebody in the United States to accept Chinese yuan for payment of the goods, guys say, I don't know what it's worth, I don't even know if it's legal, I'm not going to touch that stuff. And if China is going to go hardcore and not accept US dollars, then Chinese companies going to say, I don't want to go to prison for accepting US dollars, no thank you. Right? How are people going to trade?
Right.
If the companies agree, look, we are going to store some gold in Singapore, in this vault, and we are just going to agree to exchange the goods for 3 ounces and 0.725572, ounces of this metal, and we are transferred to you at the end of the day, and that's payment for the goods I'm going to send you. Now, you didn't use yuan, you didn't use US dollars. You traded something which is outside of the immediate power of both China and the United States. And then you can say, okay, well, now I want to sell that gold for US dollars. And you got a working sort of system. So that's what I mean when Singapore, with a Singapore-only jurisdiction vault with physical gold, can be that trustless sort of system. A little bit like crypto people talk about trustless systems where you don't need trust or much trust in order to use it.
Right.
And the closest you can come with that, I think, in the physical world is with physical gold in a trusted place like Singapore with a vault operator which only falls under Singapore law. And that's essentially where I see Singapore going.
All right, Gregor Gregersen, I appreciate the well thought out and high probabilities of what could potentially happen. I think it's a good food for us to think about. Thank you for also mentioning the things about Singapore that maybe at times we may not understand, and the updates on the reserve. And I hope we can do this again soon. And I look forward to that grand opening.